Welcome to Lending Forward, a podcast where we're lending every bit of what we know to our listeners. From real conversations and lessons learned deep within the industry to education and forward thinking. Together, we're lending forward. And as always, don't forget to subscribe to our channels and connect with us on www.atlanticbay.com. Atlantic Bay Mortgage Group, LLC, NMLS number 72043, NMLSconsumeraccess.org is an equal opportunity lender located at 600 Lynn Haven Parkway, Suite 203, Virginia Beach, Virginia, 23452. Welcome to another episode of Lending Forward. I'm your host, Taylor Ellard, and joining me today is the best Phil Treadwell. Thank you, Phil, for joining us. We're excited to have you.
Well, I appreciate you inviting me to be a part of this. I'm excited to have a conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, tell everybody a little bit about how you got into this industry. They might have heard your podcast before, so I won't be surprised if a ton of them say, oh my gosh, we love Phil. So tell us, though, for those who don't know much about you or what you've accomplished, give us your story.
Sure. So I'll keep it a short story because it's been a very eventful 18, almost 19 years in the mortgage industry. But I got in the business from a newspaper ad that kind of dates me just a little bit. They were looking for someone with sales and management experience. And I had done some sales, some corporate sales, and I had some management. I was a store manager for Blockbuster Video. That's my claim to fame.
Nice.
And a 30-minute interview turned into a 3-hour conversation. And I remember the guy at the time saying, if you decide to get in this business, you're going to look back at this conversation one day and cuss me, because once you get in the mortgage business, it's really tough to get out of it. And that was 18 years ago. So jumped right in, was working for a really good little correspondent mortgage banker. They were, at the time, it was called Full Eagle, which means you could fully underwrite FHA and VA and everything in-house. So we didn't play in the subprime world a lot, which was really kind of gaining popularity at that time. You know, we really focused on conventional FHA, VA, a little bit of rural development. And then we had a department that would do some subprime, and then you might get a piece if they ended up closing it or didn't, but that wasn't our book of business. So I share that because I got in the industry and fortunately had a company and a mentor and a manager that really taught me the fundamentals of creating productive relationships, about how to really provide value to your clients, how to put a really strong file together and qualify people the right way. And that was very, very unique to that particular time period where it was fog and mirror, get a loan. You know, you would have some account executives, if you were brokering a loan, that would say, send us an application and a W-2 and we'll condition you for everything else. I mean, there wasn't a whole lot of vetting that went on. So I jumped right in, had some success, and went on to, run a branch, owned my own company, a little broker shop. That was leading into the financial crisis. And whenever that happened, I ended up selling my little broker shop to Wells Fargo. They were the largest lender in the country at the time. I think one of every 3 loans was going through them some way, shape, or form. Was a top producer for them for a couple of years, but didn't love the big bank world, and kind of found a home in mid-sized mortgage bankers, where I went on to be a regional leader and things of that nature. So in addition, 4 or 5 years ago, started doing content marketing and social media, and kind of realizing the new relevant way to get the client and referral partners' attention. That led to a podcast and all kinds of other cool stuff. So
a very successful podcast at that.
I appreciate that.
Absolutely. Well, so you've obviously seen the ebbs and flows of the market. And recently, you've actually gone out and started to produce again, create that team environment. So having to kind of like brush off the suit, if you will, not really, but brush off the dust from what was and brought it back to life. Tell us, what have you learned? Any aha moments recently?
Yeah, there has been, and just like you said, I'd gone into a non-producing area and regional manager role around 2013. And where I came to Thrive a couple of years ago with the Thrive Mortgages, the company that I'm currently with. They hired me for a national director position, doing talent attraction, sales innovation, strategy, marketing, technology. It was really kind of a compilation of different skills and experience I had, and loved it, loved the culture, loved what we were doing. But I still, for a long time, even before I came here, really was like, I'm a sales guy at heart. I'm a marketer. I like to be on the street level, if you will.
Right.
And so my wife had also gotten licensed as an originator, and we decided to build a team where she's the originator for our team, and we built a couple support staff around us. And we had moved to the Dallas area about 4 years before. Most of my origination career had been in Arkansas and Missouri. And I share that because we started in a market where we had never done any business. We didn't have a referral book of business. We didn't have, a client database. I hadn't originated in most of the business that I had done in years past. I'd given to other team members, other people that I worked with. So it was definitely humbling to go from having created a brand on a national level within the mortgage industry. And most of my clients were B2B. There were other mortgage professionals that I wanted to collaborate with or recruit or things of that nature. Going to, referral partners and realtors and financial advisors and things of that nature, as well as direct to the customer. It was definitely a shift in our thinking about how content would land, about how we needed to have certain types of conversations. Now, we may get into this, but some of the fundamentals were very much the same in how to get someone's attention. But it was a humbling experience starting at zero. But we got traction very, very quickly, grew to about a $2.5 or $3 million run rate in about 6 months this year, which has been challenging because this is one of the more difficult mortgage environments that I've ever worked in almost 2 decades that I've been doing this. But I think the biggest thing that I learned is everything is different and everything is exactly the same. And while that sounds contradictory, the fundamentals of how and why we do business, we have done business, are doing business, and will always do business with people and with people we like. And we all know the know, like, and trust, formula, if whatnot. But how we get people's attention, how we create those relationships, how we get people to like us, that is very different. We're just in a different world. There wasn't social media back in the day. My marketing was, coffee appointments, networking meetings, and black and white flyers that I would drop off on realtors' desks or in their mailboxes for 8 or 9 hours a day. Yeah. So very much the same, but very much different.
Right. You kind of hit on it. We talked about it before. The last time this was really prevalent was 2008. Obviously, that was a different culture, environment, all of that. Everything's different now. Whereas before, you could go and you couldn't get a mortgage online. You couldn't get a house with no agent online. Now there's this whole new sphere, whole new environment that we're up against. And you and I talked about it a while ago. What people don't know, people just don't understand when it comes to affordability. People don't understand when it comes to reading between the fine lines. They're not doing it every day. They're just people that are trying to get the American dream, right? So tell us a little bit about, you preach it all the time, but tell us why content marketing and being somewhere on social media is so important.
Well, because that's where our attention is. Right. I read a statistic over the weekend. The average American spends 2.5 hours a day on social media. Now think about that for a second. We're only up for a certain number of hours. We have to eat, we have to work, we have to spend time with family. 2.5 hours a day is on social media. That's where people's attention is. So if mortgage professionals and real estate professionals and really anyone in business isn't showing up on social media for people to find them, they're missing the boat. That's just flat out the reason. The other thing is when it comes to content marketing, it is a level playing field. People, whenever they look at content of value, and again, we can unpack what is value, but when you look at a piece of content, when we spend time looking at, listening to, or watching a piece of content, we don't care how big the budget was for marketing. We don't care even really who the person is in a lot of cases. Does it resonate with us? Is it applicable to us? Do we even care? And so it's this great equalizer where now all of a sudden the small company, the indie company, can compete with these huge monstrosities where prior to that, when it was paid advertising, it was very much restrictive on how much budget that you had. So in today's market, people have to understand that marketing is about getting someone's attention. And the overall concept is to not only get their attention, but keep their attention by providing them content that they want to see. See, I think our industry has really missed the mark on this because we put out content that we want to see or that we think is valuable. And we think we're truly marketing when really all we're doing is selling. We have a pitch, we have a product, we have I like to pick on realtors a lot. They have here's my listing that's coming soon. Here's my listing that just came out. Here's my listing under contract. Here's my listing sold. And then, maybe they throw a couple open house pictures in between. The mortgage industry does the same thing, though. Here's our new product. Here's our new service. Here's how fast we closed. Here's how much production we did. And all those things are counterintuitive. People do not care. And I use the DMV test. I'm gonna go buy the domain dmvtest.com. And the DMV test is, if you're sitting at the DMV, whenever you're scrolling through your phone, no one's like, man, I hope I see a marketing video for real estate. Man, I hope a loan officer tells me about their new program that they just came out. Nobody does, right? And in Texas, it's especially important because we wait at the DMV for hours. Like it is a whole bureaucracy and institution that we don't even need to go down that rabbit hole. When we're sitting there, not where we want to be, or we're sitting there waiting on something, we're very impatient society, is we're scrolling through. We are looking for things to enlighten us, to entertain us, to put us in a good mood, to take us out of wherever we're at in that moment. I think so often when we're creating a video, when we're creating a piece of content, we forget that the people on the other end don't care. And it's not that they don't care about other people, that they're heartless, but we go to social media to be social. We go to be entertained. We go to engage with something that matters to us. And so often that's just not what people are putting out there.
It's hard. It is this fine line, I think, right? Like some look very robotic. Some look like, oh, nobody needs to do that trend. Please don't bring that trend into the real estate industry. But it's so hard. So you've got those people that are yearning and want to do it, also don't know how to come off. I think a lot of times when I talk to mortgage bankers, half the times they're like, well, I really want to do it, but I feel like I've got my hands behind my back because I don't know what to say. I don't know how to bring that valuable content to them. So where are you kind of looking for inspiration? What types of content? It just depends on your target audience. It depends on your town, your personality, all of that. But when it comes to kind of what should be said, what needs to be out there, where would you guide people?
Yeah, and that could be a whole podcast or series of podcast episodes
loaded
in itself.
Question.
But it's a great question, and it is the question. And so I'll break it up into a couple of pieces like this. First, just what you said, the basic marketing formula is we have to understand, number one, who is our audience? Who is our target market? Who's our avatar? Who is it we're trying to connect with and reach? That's the first thing you have to know. The second thing you have to know is what value, what message, what objective am I trying to deliver that particular audience? Okay, that's the second most important piece. And then third, you have to figure out what's the most effective medium to deliver that value and that message to that audience. That's the kind of the 3-step marketing formula when you're starting. So that could be audio, that could be video, that could be written. There's a lot of dynamics in there that we obviously don't have time to unpack in this particular podcast episode. But once you've kind of identified that, the next thing you have to think through is, how am I going to deliver it in a way that's relevant to them? And so the other thing that I want to preface is, they don't just care what you do. They care who you are. So that's how you really draw people in. There's a lot of talk about pillar content, and people can define it a different way. For me, I define pillar content as there's 3 or 4 or 5 things that all really resonate with us as people, right? Hobbies that we have, things we like to do, places that we go, people groups that we're a part of. I could go join a Facebook group of dads of daughters who play basketball, right? That could be a pillar. I could just talk about, me being a dad and having daughters that play basketball. Yeah. I could talk about playing guitar. I've got a couple of guitars over here behind me. I could talk about, craft beer or a lot of different things. And that's really what draws people in. That's how we create an audience. That's how we're social as people. That's where we meet friends. So that needs to be the first main part of what we're putting out on social media. Now, you also have to talk about what you do. But if there's too many commercials, people will change the channel. So it can't be all about your business all the time. That's why it's very hard when people ask the question, do I need just a personal page or do I also need a professional page? That's a difficult question because you have to understand what your intent is. But for most people, I would say you just need one page. Put out who you are and what you do. And people are like, well, I don't want to talk about my personal life. Great, you don't have to, right? Let's talk about the elephant in the room of Gary Vee. He's probably one of the most well-known people on social media. And I challenge anyone to find a picture of his kids.
Right.
Or even really know exactly how old they are, right? That's very, very difficult because he just doesn't put it out there. So you can do that. Now, when we go back to that marketing formula, as far as what kind of content to put out, you've got to figure out what is of value to people. And value is the key word. And I've got a course that we're going to launch here pretty soon. We're going to really unpack that individually for different people. But value is just, do people care? Is it relevant to them? Is it applicable to them? And we need to do that by understanding more in depth who that audience is. I'll give you an example. One of the things whenever there was 30 offers on a house, right? Early this spring and summer, a house would go on the market on a Thursday and they would essentially auction it off. We want your best and final by Sunday. And they would get 20 or 30 offers on there. And people would like, hey, we have a TBD underwrite, or we have an underwrite before contract, all these different things, which is a great program to have. If you're with a company that has that, then I highly recommend you use it. The problem is we're talking about, hey, I've got a TBD underwrite, or I have this offer ready program or buyer's advantage, however they frame it, which is great, have some type of a frame. But instead of talking about it, you're just listing a feature. You're not listing a benefit. People don't care about features. They care about how those features benefit them. So now just adjust it. Ask the question, a piece of content. Hey, for real estate professionals, are you having trouble getting your offer accepted? Do you want to get your offer to the top of the stack? How would you like your buyer's offer to be just like a cash offer, right? Any of those questions that say, okay, wait a minute, what they're getting ready to say is of potential value to me. Maybe I want to listen for another 10 or 15 seconds and then describe how what you do benefits them. Now, again, that's a very business example, but you can do that with anything. And in the economy right now, people's retirements are suffering, right? Their 401ks and stocks are getting crushed. People are having challenges with, basic monthly income because we're in a recession, but nobody wants to call that we're in a recession, or whatever that is.
Right.
Real estate is one of the best ways for the average person to create net worth, to create positive cash flow, both before, during, and I say after retirement. I guess after retirement, you may be dead, but I digress. Use the tools that you have. I think our industry's gotten really, really lazy these last few years, where you look at your phone and you have 3 messages or 15 messages from people that want your product. And we've gone from understanding how to take what we do and articulate it to the world in a way of, hey, they have something that we want, to, hey, we're just salespeople. We're professional salespeople. And I'll shut up by saying this last line here. We all know that click button, get mortgage was a great marketing tool that we all, as independent local mortgage professionals, compete against. The challenge is most, not all, most mortgage professionals today are really only a conversation or two away from being just that. And if you want to be different than that, if you want to be a true advisor, that means you have to ask questions. You have to understand how and why your customers are trying to accomplish what they're trying to accomplish. You've got to create a strategy for them. These are all of the things that our industry apparently likes to talk about first. Those things go out the window, because I'll tell you this right now. The reason we all go to a cocktail party and say we're in the mortgage business and people always ask, hey, what are rates doing? That's our fault. We've not given them anything else to talk about. And if you want people to stop asking what your rates are, you need to start talking about all the benefits that you provide people by doing what we do.
Yeah, I love that. And I think it's so important that you lead with human.
Yes.
And everything that you do, you have to lead with human. And so if that's the case, business will come. At least you're getting out there, you're being humble. Yes, please do sprinkle in what you do, but ask the questions, engage with your audience, engage with the people that are surrounding you. If you go to an event and like you said, they're just asking about rates, you need to build that relationship. That just says it's a business relationship. And in a world right now where we need to build clients for life, that's not the way to approach your business.
That's exactly right.
So.
Yeah. And I would go as far as to say the only way that you really create true connection with people is to get below this surface level relationship, right? And I know that seems obvious, but I'll use a description here. Whenever you're having a conversation with a client, most clients call and say, hey, we're relocating, or we want to refi, or we're looking at some houses, so-and-so said to call you, whatever. In those instances, and I would say most, a high 90% of loan officers jump immediately into, okay, tell me your situation. And what we need to do is we need to stop right there before we ever get into anything loan related. When you say, hey, I'm excited about your upcoming whatever it is, what's significant about this home purchase for you? What's significant about this refinance for you? And then just wait. And they'll come out with something, very generic. And I'll give you an actual real life example of a client we had. She called and she said that she wanted to talk about bond, the down payment assistance program, a bond program here in Texas. I said, that's great. Before we get into that, I'd love to know, wanting to purchase a home, what's the home purchase for? She lived in an apartment. She wanted to buy a home. So that's great. What's significant? What's important about this home purchase for you? And she said, well, I want to own property. I said, that's awesome. Owning property is part of the American dream. That's a great aspiration. What would be significant about owning property for you? And she said, well, my boyfriend owns his home. She was in her mid-40s. So my boyfriend owns a home. I think in a couple of years, we'll probably get married. I'd like to own a home. So we could buy one together and we could keep our other two houses as rental properties. I said, hey, now we're talking about real estate as an investment. That's awesome because there's some net worth and cash flow possibilities. What's significant about owning investment properties for you? Guys, two things I want you to note here. One, I didn't just stop at the surface level answer. And two, I didn't say why. When we say why to something, people on the other end typically get defensive. We have to defend that thing as opposed to saying why it's important to us. So here's where it happened. When I said, what's significant about owning investment properties to you? Then's where we finally got to it. She said, well, my grandparents had a really tough go of life, but they made something of themselves and they owned property and they gave it to my parents and my aunts and uncles. But that generation kind of squandered it and they didn't really do much with it. And my cousins and I feel like it's our responsibility to change our family tree. Okay, now we're talking about generational wealth. She called to ask about bond and down payment assistance. And through a couple of questions, getting to know her, by the end of it, we found out she wanted to create generational wealth. Now, a couple things happened. Through those conversations, we were able to find some things we had in common. Some family lived near some family of mine. Like we made a human connection.
Right.
But now what happens is as we create that strategy for her, we understand not only is there possibility for this purchase, there's a possibility of a purchase whenever her and her future husband get married. And there's also a possibility for other investment properties, which is what we want, right? There's multiple transactions here.
It's huge.
And the other thing is whenever we need her to do something, right? How many loan officers talk about, oh, we're having to rush at the last minute because I was waiting on borrower docs. We're not creating motivation for the borrowers to do what they should want to do for themselves because we're barking at them. Mm-hmm. And all we have to do is say, hey, listen, no, it's kind of frustrating, but just think once you get this home purchase done, you're one step closer to that thing we talked about. Right. And now we frame it up of she's not doing it because I've asked her to. She's doing it because this is how she's going to achieve the goal for her. And that's the problem is we don't have these conversations. We even had one client, he bought 3 homes. This was his 4th. And I said, hey, how long do you think you might stay in this house? Is this a long-term home or is it a passing through point? And he paused. He said, I don't think anybody's ever asked me that before. What kind of conviction is that on our industry that no realtor or loan person 3 transactions before ever asked how long are you going to stay in the home? But what happens is that client through a series of conversations has become actually a pretty good friend of ours because on all of these situations, we took time to understand what they wanted to do on a human level and made connections with them. And again, like I said in the very beginning, the only way to make real human connection is to get below the surface deep relationship. We think we can just provide great service and they're all of a sudden attached to us and motivated to want to work with us for life. But all we did was provide great service on one transaction. That means that our relationship with them is transactional, whether we want to believe that or not.
You can't build a client for life if you just look at everything as one and done, move on to the next one. So it's so important. That was incredible. And I think that there's so much more for us to talk about. But I think that if we lay precedents, let me ask you this. If you were to lend forward any piece of advice for where your social media efforts need to be, what would you say?
You need to be engaging in other people's content. We spend a lot of time talking about what content to create and what content to post. And I think we've missed a huge opportunity here as well, because I don't care how many followers someone has, how great their hook is, how many views they get on a piece of content. it's still only going to be seen by a certain number of people. And you don't know for sure that that certain number of people is the target audience that you're going after. But if you can go engage, comment, really, participate in someone else's piece of content, if you comment on it, they're almost for sure going to see it. Well, then what happens is if someone comments on your stuff and you don't know who it is, you go look at their profile usually, right? So when someone talks about what they're doing for the weekend, if a realtor says, hey, we were on the lake for the weekend. Hey, it was awesome. My son and I were talking about, teaching him to ride a wave runner sometime or whatever. So like, who is this person? Oh, okay, they're a lender. And they immediately appreciate that you didn't just jump right into lending conversations. And I'll say this to put a fine point on it. Of all the volume that we created in this year where we've kind of put these things to the test, 90% of the volume we closed came from referral partner relationships where we engaged in their content and they reached out to us. We did not reach out to them. So almost all of the business that we're doing right now is with relationships and connections with people who are sending us business that they engaged and reached out to initiate that conversation. And I think that's what most lenders want, isn't it? They want these inbound conversations and to kind of flip the script where we're not just, chasing people down and chasing leads down. And the way to do that is people need to engage in more content in a social way and not forget that social media is about being social, not just a media marketing platform.
I love it. Well, thank you so much, Phil Treadwell, for being on. Where can our folks find you?
Pretty easy to find. You can find me on just about any social at Phil Treadwell. Instagram's probably my primary method. Come shoot me a DM. Love to have a conversation and help any way I can.
Love it. Well, thank you again.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks again for listening to the Lending Forward podcast powered by Atlantic Bay Mortgage Group. Don't forget to tune in next week and make sure you subscribe to our channel. Remember, we all play a part in lending forward. So go lend something forward today.